Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Opus Private Client Wealth Style Podcast. My name is George Papanicolaou, and I will be your host for today. On today's episode, we'll be discussing an interesting and terrifying topic, artificial intelligence. It's different applications, and of course, a hot topic is ChatGPT. In what should and it is considered the start of the fifth industrial revolution, I've invited my very good friend back on the podcast, Chris Ward. Chris is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of the Publisher Desk, which is a full-service technology and monetization platform for content publishers. Chris, welcome, and thank you for coming on again.
Glad to be here, George.
For everyone who hasn't tinkered with ChatGPT or any of the other AI software out there, it's something. Even just right before we started recording today's episode, we were talking with Eric, who's the one who coordinates all this. And we were talking about how, the whole recording industry, voiceover applications, and, how AI is duplicating people's voices, and it's a crazy topic. So for those of you who haven't played with it yet, I encourage you to go into it. Chris and I have been having friendly discussions on the topic for a while now, which is how we kind of came up with the idea. It's very broad and super easy to kind of go down the rabbit hole. So for the listening audience, we're going to try to keep it pretty high level and talk about how AI is being integrated in the world literally right now. So I guess we should start with it. Chris, talk to us a little bit about what ChatGPT is and how it works.
So it's a natural language model that since 2020, which was ChatGPT's 3 debut, was really the first iteration of a real interface that a layman could go and interact with an AI. And so the notion that, they loaded it with loads and loads and loads of different pieces of content to be able to help people answer their everyday questions. One of the interesting things was watching a TikTok video of a real estate lawyer in New York City. I think we both watched that video, and he throws at it, it needs to have this indemnification clause, and co-use, and this and that. And he's like, this is 95% of my business. And he starts asking ChatGPT to write up a lease agreement with all these caveats in it in New York. And ChatGPT goes off and starts writing this contract. 95% of, lease agreements are boilerplate, language, right? And so he's watching it, and you could watch just the dread going over his face. Puts his hands on his head, going, oh my God, what am I going to do? It also becomes an option for someone to literally become a superhuman, and the ability for them to put out so much more production is huge, right? So just the idea of being able to interact with something that's going to tap into case law, support documents from any software that's ever been developed. In my use case in marketing and working with publishers, we used Google Ad Manager, right? And so the documents for Google Ad Manager are part of ChatGPT. So if I have a question, before I go to Google support, I go to ChatGPT first, right? And then I interact with my developers and say, hey, look, here's the problem. This is the solutions coming out of ChatGPT. This is what it looks like in Page. And you use the outputs from ChatGPT in order to affect what we're trying to do here. And more often than not, we don't even have to go to customer support anymore, because ChatGPT gives me a quicker answer. It's very helpful for our developers. It spits back the code that they may need to update. We can give ChatGPT the code that we're using and find problems in it. It really just sort of put the interface on AI that wasn't there before. And what I've seen since is that once this came out and everyone's, coming up with text to video, text to speech, cleaning up audio, looking for things in there. I was recently just at a conference where Netflix was speaking, and they're using AI for their subscription model that's ad supported in order to find the right places to insert ads, right? So similar to the conversation around how to improve audio quality and what to look for to remove, AI can do that much faster than a human can, right? So they're looking for dark fades in order to insert an ad. And these are things that, people can do, but a computer can do it way faster, way more efficiently, and give basically superhuman abilities to individuals, right?
And you talked about, you were just talking about the speed of which it processes. So I think it was yesterday we were saying how it's really been around since like 2020, but available to the public from, was it last year it came
So,
out?
yeah, December.
Right. So I thought it was pretty cool. So Chris had brought up Moore's law. For people who don't know what that is I'm going to read a definition, is a prediction about the rate of growth in the number of transistors that can be placed on a microchip, which has historically driven the exponential growth in computing power and enabled the development of advanced technologies such as AI. So that typically doubles about every 2 years. How fast is ChatGPT growing in comparison to what Moore's law says?
Right. So it follows the same sort of principles, right? So 2020, ChatGPT came out with 175 billion parameters, right? So now they're talking ChatGPT 4 is going to come out sometime around June-ish, and we're looking at 100 trillion parameters. On top of the fact that we're now all interacting with it and teaching it to become smarter, right? So it's learning from what we're asking it to do. And so if you couple that with a tenfold almost increase in parameters, it's going to become increasingly smarter and faster. And so the other part in that Moore's law is that it also becomes half the price. And so as you look at this ability to go faster and be smarter, we're also talking about it becoming cheaper, right? And so Moore's law applies to technology in general. And so you're looking at something that's potentially massively deflationary as well as increasingly smarter. And so productivity growth based on folks that are using AI to support their business models, it's as you said, the fifth industrial revolution. It's really the thing that I look at, like a light bulb, right? This is one of those inflection points that we can look back to, maybe even just 2-3 years down the road and go, wow, this is one of those things that has dramatically affected how we do business, how we do production, how we interact in the world.
And there's obviously there's going to be a lot of people. There is a lot of people who are terrified of not just Terminator, but we'll bring that up again later. But of losing their jobs, so their jobs becoming obsolete, right? So we had talked about prompts, and in our business, we talk to clients about our planning for our kids' future, saving for college, so on and so forth. And I often say, I have young kids. You have young kids. Our children's, the number one major for our children's coming out of college, the job hasn't been created yet. So this is a perfect example of certain opportunities. Yes, some jobs will become obsolete, but you brought up, going back again to the prompts, the importance of the input. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so prompt engineering, right? So, look, I have a graphic design background, business, marketing, right? One of the things that really helps create a better prompt is telling ChatGPT how to think about things, right? As a web developer, as an expert graphic designer, as a business consultant from McKinsey, right? You can give it how it should think. And then you can say to it, let's think about this step by step. And so by how you engineer your prompt, the better your prompt engineering is, the better the response you get out of ChatGPT. You can even tell it, with an IQ of 180, answer this problem. With an IQ of 120, answer this problem. I want to write a children's book for third graders. give me an output that's at a third grade reading level. And so the better that you create your prompt, the better the response that you're looking for. There's another text to image AI called Midjourney, which you have to be a little bit of a discourse savant to get it to do your thing. But the difference between me having some graphic design background and a full-on graphic designer, the prompts that they can input, use this diffusion, use this type of filter, add this contrast, the prompt that they can engineer, the output that they get is significantly better than a layman who doesn't know graphic design or photography to tell the AI what it should be doing. And so you have to have that human knowledge to create the prompt to get the best outputs. And so prompt engineering is going to be one of the things, when I went to college, there was no major in digital marketing, right? And I graduated in 2007. Now there's influencer marketing degrees, right? And so you look at how things have changed just in 15 years. This will be the next thing that folks look to as far as education and how to interact with AI and using the human knowledge. What my developers can do using ChatGPT versus myself is massive, right? I don't have a computer science degree. I don't know Python or PHP or Pine, all of those things that a developer can go into ChatGPT and really engineer really advanced prompts will get really awesome outputs.
And like you were saying before, and about the fifth industrial revolution, when there is fear, and I find this when I talk to just generally to different people, when there's fear of the rapid pace that technology is changing, you brought up the light bulb. People were terrified of that as well. And when when you start to embrace it, you really see our entire culture kind of blossom. You brought up the different generations when we were talking about this before. How Gen Xers are what is it was we're paying for somebody to do it for them. Millennials were like, oh man, now I got to figure out how to do this. And Gen Zers were the ones that were actually creating it, right? I thought that was a pretty cool, view of it. There's a bunch of, so ChatGPT is not the only one. I know there's like client relationship management software. Like we were saying right when the podcast started, there's the Adobe one for the voice. Can you go into a little bit, again, and there's a lot, but can you go into some of the different types AI products that are out there or platforms that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, they all sort
of pause.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'm going to introduce something here real quick. At this point, why don't you say something to the effect of, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Adobe. We're going to actually use that right now for the rest of this podcast. And then I will take the rest of this podcast and put you through Adobe, Chris, so they can hear the difference.
Yep.
Okay, so how do you want me to say it?
No, I want Chris to, when Chris jumps in, he'll say, well, you mentioned Adobe. So let's talk about that real quick. Adobe has a software that, however you want to describe it, their Adobe Podcast is, I believe, what they're calling it. I'm looking at it on my other screen, where it enhances audio. So we're going to actually turn that on now for the rest of the show. On my vocals, I'm speaking through a webcam microphone. You can hear how tiny it is. Let's see what they've developed. Boom. From that point on, I'll change it. And then you can go on to whatever other subject you want, but the audience will hear the difference right then. If it doesn't work, I'll edit that out. Okay. But it should work just fine. I just need to match up the timing. Sound good?
Cool.
Yep.
All right, go for it.
So for example, Adobe Podcast is an AI tool, which we're going to turn on right now, which will clean up all of the audio, right? It's going to go through, it's going to grab the voice tracks, it's going to clean up all of the background noise. It's going to take the tinny voice that you're hearing from my MacBook Air, webcam, and it's going to clean it up, right? The things that can be done with AI really sort of fall into a couple of buckets, right? Text to text, text to speech, text to video. And then when you start to think about things like audio to audio, video to video, there's a bunch of different platforms out there that are starting to get smarter and smarter as folks are using them and coming up with ways to improve them, right? So one of the things that we use is it's called video.ai, VIDYO.ai. And so one of the big, short form video wars that's going on right now between TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube is really that sub 60-second video. And so if we make a 30-minute podcast here, we can run that through video AI, and it will go and find all the natural breaks, different topics that we're talking about, and suck out 60-second video clips, brand them, throw templates on them, do the voice to text captioning all automatically, break a 30-minute podcast down into 10 different sub 60-second clips for you. And then you have social media content to post on top. Then you can go to repurpose.io, which will take those clips and then automatically go and post those off to your different social accounts. So the idea of how to use different AI tools together really comes to, there's another company out there called Zapier, right? And it's all about automation and connecting the different softwares and platforms that businesses are using in order to automate massive amounts of their business. And so as you look at how the AI offerings are improving, they're still not working together, right? So the big piece and opportunity right now is connecting those dots, right? Which you still need a human to do. And so that really sort of becomes the next piece of how to use all of these different programs in a cohesive manner in order to supplement your business, right? And so at some point, my AI bot is going to talk to your AI bot and go, hey, what business opportunities do you have that I'm interested in? And it's going to go do it, right? And so the same thing works for small businesses and marketing, right? We have folks that we want to target for, Joe's plumbing business, right? You can use ChatGPT in Google Sheets. And so there's a Chrome extension that allows you to pull ChatGPT into Google Sheets. And so as Joe the plumber who wants to advertise in Naples, Florida, can come up with different personas that he wants to advertise to. He can then in Google Sheets create those personas, put in, the messaging that he wants to come up with a prompt, and have ChatGPT create different call to actions and different marketing hooks for every single persona in Google Sheets. Then he can use that Google Sheet to feed something like Canva, which will automatically go and create all of his Facebook advertising and then post those on a consistent schedule off to Facebook using something like a Repurpose.io or any other social media tool out there like Hootsuite. And literally use AI to automate their marketing campaign via Google Sheets. So you don't have to go back and forth into the prompt window and have it done for you in an automated fashion. And you don't have to, pay a marketer, right? You can tell ChatGPT, hey, as a marketing expert, create a content strategy for me over the next 60 days for my plumbing business, targeting X, Y, and Z. And it will pop out all of those things. And it's really efficient and saves a lot of time, energy, and money in figuring out what you should and need to do as a business.
Yeah, and you kind of you're going down that path of, I look at it as it's there to really enhance different industries and businesses. It's not there to necessarily always problem solve. So one of the things I find that's part of the both limited ability and also ethical considerations is it has issues with complex questions and situations, right? So it's kind of like the cell phone. Those of us who grew up without any cell phones know what it's like with no cell phone and with cell phone. Our kids know, iPad and screen right away, right? Yeah, and it's stuff that we can't really comprehend. The youth today are going to know AI and just AI, and I know that they'll end up working out these kinks, but how do we stay away from a fear of mine? how do we stay away from those youth? Our youth now going to something like ChatGPT and asking it a question and thinking that is the answer, because there could be a lot of flaws. There's certain, just like I said, complex questions and situations it can't necessarily answer. It's very textbook. Because I've played with it a lot, and when it spits out answers, some of them are good, right? But it's like reading a textbook, and it gives you a very textbook answer. There's also biased in training data, so it is picking up all these different things from different places, and the more we play with it, obviously, the smarter it gets. But that's why there's all these competing companies coming out too, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, there was a doctor who was playing with it, and it literally made up a fake study.
That's
right?
crazy.
And so, like I mentioned before about, the human knowledge and those putting in the prompts to get, great outputs, you still have to question everything, right? And so, that doctor went and looked up the output and tried to find the study that it was citing, and it didn't exist. And so, just like any, Google result or Bing result or whatever, those results are written and geared towards search engine optimization, right? You're not being given a result because it might be the best one, but it was the one that was written the best for the search engine algorithm, right? And so for the same thing, the prompts that come out, sometimes I'll give a piece of code that it gave me to my developer, and they'll go, this doesn't work, right? And, I'm not going to be able to put, developer in my title because the ChatGPT output doesn't work, right? And so there's still the need to check and test whatever the outputs are, right? And so there's caution, right, in trusting anything 100%, right? I always say if somebody agrees with you 100%, they're lying to you, right? So if you look at the outputs as something that are incredibly helpful and can point you in the right direction, and more often than not give you the right answer, it's still something that needs to be back tested.
Yeah, the question just popped up, right? A big question on AI is for the long term. Who's programming it? Its morality and how, and kind of again leaking into the what are we really looking at? Who's in control of this? We're definitely in its infancy, but I think it's super exciting and scary. Most things that are new and impactful are scary and exciting at the same time, right? Where does this go? I did want to bring up one part because I think everybody's got certain frustrations when you call into any kind of 1-800 number, like for like a helpline. So Chris and I were talking about this last night. This should in a rather short period of time, I'm hoping, completely take over the call center, prompt 1, prompt 2. You'll be able to either call in or type in, and boop, 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 and it'll get you exactly to where you got to go, to whom can help you directly. But you want to build on that real quick, Chris?
So part of openai.com is GPT Playground, right? So it's a place where anyone can go in and feed ChatGPT information, right? So you can take all your support documentation for a software platform and put it into Playground and create your own chatbot that's based on the information in your support docs, and give your customers a very detailed chatbot that's going to respond to them with the answers, right? Most call centers that are outside of the US have someone who's sitting in front of a computer with those support docs that company hoped you'd go look at yourself so that they don't have to give you customer service. And the chatbot can replace that call center, right? Half the time I'm going to someone for support, it's because I already know the answers and the support docs haven't helped me enough to get me there. And so it's usually just a hurdle for me to get past that call center to get back to a technical support that's here in the US that actually knows the code base, that can help fix the problem that we know exists, that a support doc's not going to help me with, right? And so the idea that you can train your own chatbot on your support docs will dramatically impact the need for call centers, right? And so one of the other things we talked about was Prince's Law, right? That the square root of the size of an organization creates 50% of the revenue. So when you have 4, you're talking 2. So the other 2 creates the 50%. Then you go to 9, 3 creates 50%, 6 create the other 50%. And as you get to a 100-person company, now you're saying 10 people create 50% of the revenue. The other 90 create the other 50%. And so the idea that you can create better scales of efficiency by using AI, by having fewer employees, you're going to see the ability for those top 10 to be able to produce way more revenue with fewer extra people and support. And when you start to look at roles at which are answering in call centers, are back-end data entry, all things that can start to be automated. The Austin Police Department actually just released an AI program that's all about data entry and saving massive amounts of times in report creation, right? So they have now a system that uses AI to create all of the reports that someone would go and make an arrest, and they got to put in all this information and type it all up. Now they give it a couple simple prompts with very basic information, and the AI goes off and writes the entire report. And so what sucked up tons of man hours now doesn't.
Well, full disclosure, to in preparation for this podcast, I asked ChatGPT to give me talking points, and that's really how we, I did add to it, but what typically takes, hours of prep, I prompted ChatGPT to give me several talking points, right, and then spit it out in maybe a minute, and then I just kind of worked on it. So what would have taken me hours really took me maybe 30, 45 minutes in prep, which is insane. But kind of to your point, time is money, time is freedom. So we can all be a lot more efficient because it frees up more time. Or devil's advocate on that one, we could just work more because we are we are gluttons for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, take Sportsnot, right? Our sports website, right? So they'll go and make a 7-minute video, right? But I want them to go and accompany that 7-minute video with a full-length article. They can take that video, they can get the text from it, the transcript, in automated fashion. They can take that into ChatGPT. They can say, summarize this, turn it into a 600-word blog post. They can then go and edit that blog post because of AI detection. SEO will downrank it. So they need to go in and use that as their base to go in and update everything. And so that they'll get past the AI detectors and they can go in and do that. They would have had to take notes. They would have had to watch their video over and over and over again. But now they can just, with another Chrome extension, go to YouTube where they've uploaded it, grab the entire transcript, paste it into ChatGPT, get a summary, get a 600-word starting place, and then add the human element. And so what would have taken them, 6 hours, 8 hours to go and do their video and then do their written component, they can just do their video and in 30, 40 minutes have the written component and move on. And so to your point, right, like how much time do we spend, you're writing this, okay, you get interrupted, you get up, you get an email you answer to. What should have been a 2-hour, 3-hour task turns into an all-day thing. Now you set yourself a 30-minute window to do it, and it's done.
And just because I know I'm going to get asked this, and people are going to ask me, like, why didn't you ask? This isn't the start of Skynet.
So as of right now, ChatGPT is not connected to the internet, right? These Chrome plugins are sort of bridging that gap, right? So there's a ChatGPT, Google plugin. So you put that in whenever you do a Google search, you'll get the ChatGPT response next to that Google response. the idea that one day one of these goes, humans are bad, we don't want them here anymore, is a terrifying one, right? So Elon Musk is one of those folks who's been ringing the bell. It does not escape me that he was the one who donated massive amounts of money folks, and now he's going, wait, this thing, it's biased, right? And so now he's going to do his own. But ChatGPT was his. So, the idea that, the machines are going to take over the world, everything needs guardrails, right? We look at, Section 230 for publishers, and what's the difference between a publisher and not a publisher when it comes to the platforms, and the editorial control that they have. The same thing applies to AI, right? This is a new technology. It needs regulation. Folks need to understand that they are not interacting with a person, it's a computer. And the idea that the controls that we hand over really becomes sort of those things that need guardrails around them, right? I don't want, a F-35 flying over my house completely controlled by AI that has no human going, you can't do that. That's a terrifying thought. But in the same respect, right, would that potentially save human life? Yes, right? So the notion of where we draw the line as to how far we can let this go on its own is one of those crazy things, right? Elon talks about Neuralink. There's no way I'm putting a chip in the back of my head to make it efficient so that I'm happy to text or speak to it. I don't need it in my head, right? But there's going to be folks who do that, who want to do that, right? And so the question becomes, should the government step in and say, nah, let's not put chips in people's heads? It's definitely something that as a society we need to have a chat about, because it could go one way or the other. It either becomes an incredibly useful tool, or an incredibly destructive one. I mean, we know what 50% of the internet traffic is today. It goes to adult content, right? So could this be looked at as something that folks are using to do nefarious things? Obviously, right? And so could it end up going and doing nefarious things on its own? Also a potentially scary question.
So, I mean, I could talk about this for hours, but do you have, so wrapping up today's episode, do you have any final thoughts or key takeaways you want to share with the audience, dude?
Yeah, look, I think that AI is something that's going to help us all be more efficient, right? And it's always a goal to try and get more time back so you can generate more revenue, and time is money. And so the notion that, you don't need an SEO expert anymore because the AI is going to do it. You don't need a marketing plan anymore because the AI is going to do it. You want to go into it and tell it to make you a meal plan and then give you a shopping list to support that meal plan with all of the recipes in it. Right. The hardest thing about staying on a diet is, going shopping. You're in the grocery store and you're like, okay, I got this meal plan of what I'm supposed to eat. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to buy. It'll give you the shopping list, right? So the idea that, I don't remember a single phone number anymore, right? I've got my childhood home, my wife's cell phone number, and my own, and that's about it, right? I no longer save, mental space for phone numbers, addresses, directions. I don't keep it to memory anymore. And I think that there's going to be a lot of other things that we're going to free up our own mind space for, that AI will help us take care of. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, to think about. In the same respect, I say to myself, well, if the internet's gone tomorrow, I better have a book that tells me how to grow my food. So it's one of those things where you hope for the best, prepare for the worst, then just make sure that you're doing these things mindfully, and think about the impacts that they're going to have on your employees and your clients, and don't go too far down the rabbit hole, because in the event that we find that certain things aren't working the way we need them to, we always need to be able to pivot.
Yeah. Well, I always see, I see ahead of us, there's always going to be a need for, high level experts to help break down the complexities. I just have a lot of faith in the human brain and the power of the human brain to analyze much more than a computer can, because of emotion, which a computer will never be able to feel. That said, Chris, appreciate you, man, taking the time, sharing your expertise and opinions with us. Thank you to the listening audience for tuning in. Be sure to click that subscribe button below. Find out more about our next podcast. Be well, and we'll talk soon.